Hello, and welcome to the Coffee with Demons podcast, where everyone is welcome and no one is judged. On this podcast, we'll explore the minds and the demons of individuals with different backgrounds, mindsets, and missions. My hope is that you walk away stronger than ever after listening to the stories of inspiration, empathy, and intellect that the Coffee with Demons podcast has to offer. Everyone battles demons, but no one has to do it alone. Now enjoy the content and savor the coffee. Number 4 is a good one. On this episode, my guest was Nick Wilkinson, a good friend of mine who I grew up with, who I've known for quite some time, but somebody who I didn't quite fully understand until I guess he came on this podcast. It was a good one. We had a great conversation. I think our listeners will get a lot from it, and I just want to, thank Nick for coming on. He gave great value, talked about a lot of different things, and it was really fun for me as well. But like I said, I took Nick at face value, I guess, and I know I shouldn't have, and I preach against that. I fell victim to it. I did, and he came and proved to me once again that there is more to somebody that meets the eye. So, without further ado, here's the episode number 4 of the Coffee with Demons podcast with Nick Wilkinson. Enjoy. Good to go. All right. Well, we're good to go. So, this is the 4th episode of the Coffee with Demons podcast, and today I have Nick Wilkinson here with me, and I'm actually super, super excited to get into this. So, just to give the listeners a little bit of background of who he is and who he is to me, grew up together, did multiple different things from sports to scouts to going to school. I mean, we played on the same teams, hung around the same people, so I know Nick pretty well, and I think he knows me pretty well, and I'm, like I said, super excited. So I'll let Nick kind of give who he is, what he does, and what he's trying to do. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I was excited when you asked me to come on because, like I've been telling you guys, I think this podcast has a lot of potential because there's a lot of legitimacy to what you guys are saying and what you're doing and the type of people you're bringing on and the awareness that you're bringing to the issue that really no matter where you're from and who you are, there's always something that you're going to be dealing with, and so I'm glad to be here, so I appreciate you bringing me on. Yeah,
definitely, and sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to steal that, just you saying that, and before Nick came on, I asked him to be on the podcast. He has his own business, and he's an intelligent kid. He's good at talking. I thought it'd be a great episode, and then he sent me his just kind of what he wanted to talk about, and I was kind of taken back a little bit, and I kind of fell victim to, what I kind of preach and pray, just about how there's more that meets the eye, or you know what I'm saying. But I read through your stuff, and I was really like, man, I fell into it. I thought that Nick was just Nick, so I'm super excited for you to be able to tell your story and just prove or just be another case study and an example that, everyone fights demons or has things going on.
Yeah, well, it's actually kind of funny because I remember right after you asked me, I kind of told some people, I was like, yeah, Johnny asked me to be on the podcast and I'm going to do it. And a couple of people were like, well, dude, we were kind of drinking a little bit, and they were like, I got to be honest, like, what are you going to talk about? Like,
right.
What do you have to be, like, what kind of demons do you have? And it's funny because that is a extremely common misconception for most people is that, like, you see somebody, I mean, even for, me and you growing up, it's like both of us, it looks from the outside looking in, we had great lives, great families, people, it seemed like we had no problems, but that's never the case.
Never.
Because it's always like, it's all relative of your background and what you're susceptible to. Like, everybody has something in their head going on at some time. I mean, even the most successful people in the world, do you think Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos and those type of guys, do you think they they're billionaires. Do you think they go through life with no problems?
Right.
Hell no. I mean, every single person on this earth, even people that talk about the subject, like you could bring up Tony Robbins or Oprah Winfrey, those people have struggles. I mean, if you look at and you read their books, like, the stuff that they talk about is not only their problems, but how they deal with them. But the message that they portray to people is that look, we all have these problems. These are the type of things that you can do to not get rid of them, because you can never get rid of it. You're never going to reach the light at the end of the tunnel where you're like finally like, oh, I'm all good. I'm never going to feel a sad thought again. You never reach that. There's always going to be something coming up no matter who you are. So that's why I was so pumped to come on too, is just because from the reading and stuff that I've done, that's just really what I've gotten out of it. And as I went through this, this story that we'll talk about in a little bit, it became apparent to me very early on that as I started studying these different people that, have become successful throughout their lives, they realize that fact early on in their life, and then they just persevere through those times and are able to keep on moving and keep on growing and constantly, it's the constant cycle of success, failure, and it's never ending. You're always going to have these ups, and then you're going to have these downs. Right. So.
Yeah, and I think that was and also a big issue for me growing up is, like you said, our life seemed great. So I was always thinking, I have it so good, and I would see people who didn't have it as well as I did, and maybe that was an issue or another problem that I struggled with. I wouldn't recognize that I had problems, or I wouldn't let myself. I was always trying to, be the bigger guy and just say, just deal with it. Or you don't have this problem. You're better off. Like, you're fine. But, taking into account that everyone has problems. And I think learning that even when I did was great. And if I have a roadblock now, I'm kind of just like, this is part of life. I got to get through it. Mm-hmm. Definitely. So
for sure. Yeah. Well, I do want to bring back up though. We did when we were growing up, man, and we had so many good memories, like going to Boy Scout camps. And I swear to God, we spent I think from my 6th to my 8th grade year, the entire time was spent inside your van going places.
Right. Yeah. And there are some YouTube videos out there. And shout out Tanner Malmcall. There are some YouTube videos out there. I think I kid you not, my sister filmed us laughing from Scottsbluff, Nebraska to North Platte. Yeah. And it was some great times. We started
faking it at one point, but we just continued.
You got to fake it. It was great. Definitely some good memories. The other day I was actually telling the story when you, Tanner, and Carson cut down that tree in the national park, and the sheriff came out. And
that was bad.
Yeah, that
was ugly.
We made Scouts fun. It was definitely a good time.
Yeah, if you think Boy Scouts is for nerds, you should have seen us back then.
It was. I always looked forward to summer camp, but definitely. So
let's kick it off.
Yeah, you ready to get into it? So I'm gonna let Nick kind of tell his story. I'll be chiming in here and there, but the floor is yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, hop in at any time, because I as I'm going through the story, like I'd like to have an outside perspective on kind of what you thought of the whole thing going on. Because honestly, okay, well I'll just go ahead and start. So it all started before I graduated from high school. High school was a good time for me. Had a lot of friends, got along with a lot of people. And, it was a confident time in my life. I was outgoing, loved hanging out with people, had it all going on. And but by the time it was all over, I was ready to go. I was ready to get back, and I was ready to go to college and kind of see what it was all about. I was pretty excited. And so the summer after graduating from high school, I had a big party at my house, and a couple scuffles went on throughout the night, and the cops ended up getting called. And so they showed up, and I answered the door. Me and Grayson Flanders answered the door, and we were kind of stumbling around, and they were wondering what was going on. They said they'd gotten a call of some fights, and there was some blood out on the front yard. And so we kind of were like, oh, what are you talking about? Like trying to act like we didn't know what was going on. And anyway, they kind of stood there and kept talking to us, and it was apparent to them that we were obviously intoxicated and probably underage, because we looked like we were 16, even though we were 18. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so they said, hey, well, you have parents home or anything? And we said, no, my parents aren't here, and they're out of town. So they were like, well, why don't you give them a call? And so I got the home phone, gave them a call. They were out in Colorado skiing at the time. And so I gave them a call, and they were talking to the police or whatever. And And I mean, it's kind of, when I think about it now, it's so embarrassing the way that I acted to them at the time. To not my parents, but the police when they were standing there. You know, I was just a dick and kind of trying to pull, because a lot of times when you're younger, you hear like, oh, you know, they can't come onto your property without a warrant and all that stuff. And so that's kind of like that's the card I was trying to pull is, oh, you can't be here. You know, you have no reason to be here. And, but anyway, they called my parents and they were like, hi, we have your son and his buddy here. And they're, you know, they look obviously intoxicated, and we were, and so they said
a little bit closer.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, you're all good.
They said, you know, or is it okay if we go inside? And actually, my dad was with one of his friends that was a lawyer at the time, and he went and asked him. He said, hey, you know, the cops are at our house. They've been drinking. Should I let them go inside? He said no. So that pissed him off, because when they have to go out and get a search warrant for something stupid just to come in, like when clearly there's something going on, it's upsetting to them. So then they left. They went and got a search warrant, pretty much had the house surrounded. Ended up, we all got in trouble. Everybody got MIPs, except they gave me a procuring. Now, whether or not I would have got a procuring if I wouldn't have been such an asshole, and if I would have let them come inside, is up for debate. You know, you never know. Maybe I would have gotten it. Maybe I wouldn't have. But the procuring is 10 days in jail. So when I got the procuring, I went to jail for 10 days. And I went in, I got bailed out, got a lawyer, and then I just pled guilty, so we didn't contest it at all. I just said, you know what, because after the fact, I was like, God, I was so dumb. Like, I clearly was the culprit. You know, I had done something wrong. I was drinking underage, had people at my house. It was like there's nothing to fight. I wasn't going to sit there and get a lawyer and lie about what had happened. So I pled guilty, and then so I was sentenced 10 days in jail. I got work release, which was nice. You know, I was able to come out. I was there for 10 days total. 7 of the 10 days I got out for 10 hours, which was super nice, because the fact of going to jail is not the worst part about jail, in my opinion, from my experience, isn't actually being in there. It's the fact that everybody else knows that you're in there, and it's embarrassing as fuck. Like, when it happened, like the feeling that I felt just knowing that every single person in the town, like, oh, you know, that dumbass Wilkinson kid had, you know, got in trouble, went to jail, what an idiot. And, like, I have a stupid-ass mugshot online now, and that's just me looking dumb and drunk. And it's just embarrassing. And it was really difficult, because it wasn't even so much for me, but it was like seeing my parents and embarrassing my family like that was extremely difficult for me to go through and to think about, too. Because, you know, it's one thing to make a mistake and have all the repercussions come back on you, but I would say that 10 days in jail was harder for my parents than it was for me.
Definitely. And from my point of view, you know, and I'm excited to, you know, to kind of get into hearing about what you went through and your mindset, how it changed and stuff. But, you know, seeing that Nick was in jail, it was like, I thought that you would be in jail kind of like smiling, like being like, just, and not even in a bad way, not even saying that, you know, that's a bad attribute to have, but just that you were kind of like, screw this, it doesn't matter, I'm getting out and I'm going to college. And in my head, I was like, he's fine, like, it's all good, he's probably just brushing it off his shoulders. So for you to even just have a different emotions than what I thought, that was kind of what I was trying to say at the beginning of this, but it gets a little bit deeper than that, just that I never knew. I don't know, no one really knows what a person's going through.
Right. And that's kind of the perception that, like, I mean, I honestly, that's kind of how I was acting, like, my personality is always like, oh, it's all good, like, I don't give a shit, that type of thing. And that's always how I that's always how I act in any situation. If something bad happens, it's like, all right, it's all good, we'll get through it.
And I guess I was taking that at face value, and I did, and not just you, but maybe everybody when I was in high school, I was taking it at face value, at least the kids that in my head weren't supposed to have problems,
Mm-hmm.
And even if they had a problem, it was like, I was still like, oh, they're all good.
Right.
So I'm not going to say that I completely didn't have an emotional intelligence when I was in high school, but I definitely thought that the kids who had it good always had it good. So, it's crazy growing up and learning differently.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the thing, too, is because, like, something that I have written down here is that, like, it's not even that the act in itself was that bad, but it was like what was going on mentally in my head was like unbelievable. You know, it's like it to the outside, like for me, it was so much like you look at it, even when I think about it now, like if I think about the feelings, it almost gives me goosebumps, just like the type of stuff that like the anxiety that was forming during this process of like the time that I got in trouble to the days leading up to when I went to jail and then continued, like those feelings continued on into college and worsened a little bit in the scenario that I went into. And those give me, it just gives me goosebumps thinking about that type of stuff again and those feelings. But because at the time, it doesn't like, it's really not that big of a deal. Like jail for 10 days, it was procuring. Like I had a party at my house and a bunch of people were there. But it was so disappointing. And I feel that the anxiety and the depression that came after was because of, the feeling that I felt for my parents. Like there were several times, like I remember probably 2 days after it happened, I hadn't like really had an emotional reaction to it yet. I was just kind of like, I was calling everybody, telling them, talking to people about what had happened and talking through different things. And then like one time I was in my car by myself and it was the first time that it was just me, and my thoughts. And I was heading to work and dude, I just broke down in the car, just like, started crying, and it just the like what I had done and the repercussions that were going to come, and like my parents weren't back from their trip yet because they had like just gotten there, and they weren't going to be home for like another 4 days. And I was in my car on my way to work and just lost it, just absolutely lost it. And then my parents got home, and for 2 or 3 weeks, my mom would just sit at the end of my bed and cry and just like, oh, what are we going to do about this? Because it was hard for her to see her son. And there are some of their, things that they would say is like, well, we must have just fucked up. We clearly didn't raise you right. And it's not even because like, oh, I had a party, but the way that I was treating the officers when they showed up too, they were so disappointed in that too.
Do you think that got back to your parents?
Yeah, it did, because like they could hear me on the phone when I was talking to, when they were there at the door and they were on the phone with them. They could hear me like saying shit to them, because like I don't even know all the stuff that I was saying, but I was being an asshole and just like thought it was bad. And so they were pissed about that and they were disappointed. And then so my mom over and over again would just cry. She'd just cry because she was so distraught because then she thought that her friends were going to look at her differently because what I had done, it was on me that they felt this way. And that was the hardest part. And then for my dad, he never really got super emotional or anything. He was just disappointed, and it was clear. But then before I had to actually admit into jail, we play in this golf tournament that we play in every year. And he hadn't cried about the issue at all. But anyway, we played, and the second day of the tournament was the day, like, we got done at, like, 3, and I had to check into jail at, like, 5. So we got done playing, and I had to leave. And I got to jail, and the next, and I didn't know if we, how we did in the tournament. And the next day, he came in, and it was probably, like, he came in, and when you go to jail, like, you can only, they can't come and like visit you at your cell. Right. There's a video screen that they come and they see you, and you can see them, they can see you. And so I was in my fucking gown and stuff and sitting in this room, and he came in and to visit, and he told me that we had won. And we were obviously happy, and then but like as he was telling me, he just broke down. The first time that I'd seen him cry throughout the whole process. Because I think just like him seeing his son in a fucking jail cell, like, that's just something that you never really think that will happen.
I'm sure he never thought it would happen.
And it wasn't like for, anything ridiculous, but it was just like he just broke down, and then, so obviously I did too, because, it's tough when you start seeing your dad crying. It's tough. And so that was definitely the hardest part for me, was just seeing the disappointment with my parents. And then I guess moving on from that, I went through that whole process, and that kind of brought on some anxiety that started to form moving into college. And so I actually, the day I got out of jail, I moved down to Lincoln. That was the day that we moved into the frat house.
Right. And so, to me, when you were like, I don't know, like I was saying, I just didn't think there was going to be anything, bad that came from it. Yeah, it happened, and yeah, you got a procuring charge or whatnot. But to me, I was almost like, oh, he's going to have a story to tell when he goes down to college. He's almost going to have like a little street cred. He's going to be able to, make people smile about it. And I just never in my head did it go, never was I like, that's, that might follow him and, haunt him a little bit. So.
Yeah, well, and I kind of thought the same thing, like when things were initially happening, I was like, once I get through this, like I'll get down to college and like I'll just be the guy that went to jail. Like it'll be a sick story. That's kind of what I thought.
Exactly what I thought.
But it was like just the stuff that started to bubble up during that, like 2-month period of when this was all happening. I mean, I guess it's not something that just, and it's like, it's not something that just goes away in a day. Mm-mm. And so as that stuff bubbled up and then I went to college, the transition from high school to college is tough for anybody, usually. I mean, there's plenty of people that go from high school to college and then they struggle through it and get depressed and they get anxiety because they're just not used to this setting that it is. And I feel that I potentially could have had those similar feelings even if I hadn't went through that beforehand, but they probably, escalated things where...
When you were going through those feelings, did you ever give note to it that this is anxiety, this is depression, this is what I'm dealing with? Or was it kind of just like you were just inside your own head and you were like, I'm not feeling too hot about this?
Not really. I didn't ever really I didn't really ever label them. Like I did after a while. I did, like I would say like late into my freshman year of college. Like I was like, okay, I'm having like, like I'm going through depression. Like I could like one point I was like, okay, this is what this is. Cause like it was just week after week, day after day, waking up and you're just like, holy shit, I don't want to move. Like I don't want to get out of bed. I'd get nervous before we'd go out and drink, so basically I went down with the whole, like living in a frat, it's a pretty insane like thing, in itself, because in high school, like you've had the same friends for the last 10 years. Yeah. And so you move to college and there's all these new people. And in the frat house, I moved in with like 120 dudes. And it's totally different than what you're used to. And college in general is. But it was like, then you're starting to do things where you're meeting all these different people. You're having to like stand up and talk in front of people that you don't know and you're not really comfortable with. So having anxiety and having to do stuff like that, then it just like escalated everything. And then I was like, oh, I don't want to like I didn't want to go to class. I remember I had a speech class. I remember freshman year, first semester, and I had a speech class. And there was one day like it was time to give our speech. I fucking dropped the class. I was like, I'm not gonna. Because my anxiety was so bad, I was like, I'm not going to fucking do this. Yeah,
so just like you were saying, like I'm sure piling those things on top of each other just made it, tenfold, just because you would have got that anxiety as is, and having that underlying anxiety didn't help. Did you ever talk to anybody? Did you ever reach out to anybody? Or not even like reach out like, hey, can we talk? But did you ever say, maybe you and your buddies were hanging out, were you like, yeah, I just haven't been, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, anything like that?
Mm-mm. No, I didn't, because, and that's kind of what we were saying earlier, is like, that's just kind of how I've always, that's kind of how I've just played the card.
Right.
Like, I've always been like, I don't give a shit. Like, I'm fine. And so, like, people would bring it up, and it didn't bother me. Like, it didn't piss me off when someone would be like, oh, you went to jail, like, and brought it up. It didn't ever bother me. Like, I wasn't like, dude, shut up. I don't want to talk about it. But it was just the feelings of when I was going through it always came back and just, like, gave me little goosebumps. And it's just, anxiety is just a weird feeling. And I would get that feeling if somebody brought it up for a long time after. I mean, I'd say at least 2 years, if somebody brought it up, I would kind of, and it didn't, like I said, it didn't make me mad when people would ask me about it or talk about it or anything. It didn't bother me in that way. But it was just that those feelings would kind of come back, and I'd think about it. And I think the anxiety is what led for my entire freshman year, I mean, I was definitely in depression, and I just didn't feel like I'm myself. Everything that I would do, like, it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel like it was me in high school. It didn't feel like it was me even honestly making the decisions. It was just bizarre.
Anything that ever, I mean, was there a flick of a switch that happened, and you were like, you got out of it anyway, or did it just fade? And you kind of time dealt with it,
like the depression, anxiety,
right,
and stuff. No, it was over the course of I would say at its worst was middle of like second semester freshman year. The beginning of second semester freshman year was definitely when it was at its worst for anxiety and depression. And I never talked to anybody about it, but one of the things that helped was just getting out of like the frat house. And it wasn't because like there was bad things going on in the frat house or anything, and it wasn't there was anybody in the frat house that was like doing anything to me that made me this way. Because I mean, I have great friends. Mm-hmm. Some of my best friends are in SIGEP, and I still hang out with them to this day. So it wasn't that sort of thing, but just getting away from having to deal with so many different people all the time and like go through so many things that just caused stress on me while I was going through that was good.
Right, because I like in a depressive state, it's almost like I don't want to see conversations take way more strength than they normally do, and even just like little everyday interactions or simple conversations can just feel so daunting. You don't want to do it. So
mm-hmm. Yeah, and so one of the things that started the process of when I, started to feel better was I moved out, and I lived with two guys, Mitch Anderson and Derek Jackson. I live with Derek Jackson now still, so I mean he's a great guy. And really, when we moved out, we still partied a lot and drank and did all that stuff, but we also us three kind of took it upon ourselves to start. I mean, for some reason, it wasn't even like, for some reason, we just started to get into, like books and podcasts and meditation and journaling and just stuff like that. And very, very slowly, sophomore year, we didn't do all of that stuff a ton, but we just started talking about these different ideas and slowly but surely and I lived with those guys sophomore, junior, and senior year. And over time, like things just compounded. And we continued to hang out together and read these books and talk about these different ideas that we were learning. And it wasn't even that I was specifically going after anxiety and depression.
Right. So I was just going to ask, so that wasn't a conscious decision to like, I'm going to fight this, I'm going to get out of this hole. It was just kind of, it happened.
Yeah, not really. It wasn't like, I need to do something about this. Like, I felt that way. I mean, the books that we started reading first, I would do stuff like meditation to help with anxiety, and it would make me feel like a little bit better. And so that was those, I guess, like meditation was one thing that I started to do because it helps with anxiety. Mm-hmm. And like journaling was one thing that was really nice for that. But then as we started to do other stuff, I mean, I got really involved in like business books and business podcasts and stuff, and that really wasn't on purpose, but it started to take my mind off of it. And one of my big points, I think, that I want to try and portray to people is that, like, when you're going through those hard times, struggling for stuff, having something that you give a shit about, really, really are passionate about, mm-hmm. can help you come out of that.
Immensely.
Mm-hmm. Because, go ahead.
Well, all I was going to say is, one thing that I'm trying to, really hit on with Coffee with Demons is that these mediums that people think that are the classic, write poetry, make music, make art, to try and express yourself, they're not the only forms of expression. Like you were saying, how you got into businesses, like that is 100% on the same lines as, me writing books or an artist painting. That's exactly the same thing. Before we get away from it too much, talking about just dealing with demons that, I don't know, that you're not supposed to have. Mm-hmm. Or you're not supposed to have. I think that's just ground into our society and our culture that especially for, somebody, kids like us that aren't supposed to have problems. It's ground into our culture that, those aren't problems. You're okay. Keep on keeping on. And I think that's something we need to get away from, and that's what I'm trying to do. Just raise awareness and
Right.
and just get people to realize that, these problems are abundant in everybody's life. And I think that everybody can just find whatever medium they want, no matter what that is. So we'll get into more. We're going to take a quick break right now. So I hope you enjoy what you're listening to, but don't forget that Coffee with Demons is more than just a podcast. Head on over to www.coffeewithdemons.com to check out news on our meetings, new blogs, and even new podcasts. Thank you. So I know you went on a couple big trips, and definitely to different parts of the world. If you want to talk about that a little bit and how that helped you even unconsciously or consciously come out of the dark state you were in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so after my freshman year of college, actually, I got the opportunity to go. There was this guy named Dean Jacobs, and he was going to run a trip to the Amazon rainforest. And there was 15 guys that were going to be able to go in SIGEP. And so I signed up and got the opportunity to go. And basically, so what the trip was, it was 2 weeks long. We went down to Ecuador, and we stayed there for a little while. Kind of visited the different cities in Ecuador and checked it out. And then we got on a plane and flew into the Amazon rainforest and stayed with this tribe there. And these tribes, I mean, if you look into it, there are some tribes down there that have only been discovered for the last 35, 40 years. And so this is this tribe that we stayed with. It was called the Achuar tribe. And so we stayed down there in the Amazon rainforest, and we did a couple, cool rituals with them. Even besides that, just the experience of being in the Amazon rainforest and seeing the type of life that these people live was an extremely eye-opening experience, because it's something that where, honestly, for us to go there, it would probably be crazier for them to come to where we live as opposed to us going there.
Yeah, I agree.
Because, they never see besides books, like, they never see anything. They're not going to get on Instagram and see this type of stuff. Like, we can go watch documentaries about these type of people on Netflix and stuff, but for them to come here would be absolutely insane. So just the simplicity of their lives and how happy they were was good to see, because if you talk about the necessities of life, they had all of them. They don't need iPods to, have fun and live their life. And so that was a really eye-opening experience for me. And then another one that we went on was in Africa. It was the same guy, Dean Jacobs, led us down to Africa, and we did some safari trips, and we went on the Nile River and did whitewater rafting.
Oh, cool.
And that was an amazing trip, and the camaraderie between the SIGEP guys that we had there was good. But honestly, I mean, the reason I wanted to talk about this a little bit is just how important travel is for these type of things, to open up your mind to the different ways that people live in the different cultures is something that I found extremely valuable when I was, going through that.
Mm-hmm. And I kind of talked, and me and Keenan Serrano, the first podcast that I did, was a lot of it was talking about travel and getting out into the world and experiencing different things, just to grow as a person, and not even grow your checklist of where you've been, but to experience these things and understand that life is different everywhere, and you're never really stuck in a hole. Like, I went to New Zealand, and it was kind of like you were talking about. After my freshman year of college, I was went through some stuff, had anxiety, had depression, didn't really think that was that, and I was like, I can't go back to school. Kind of blamed it on school, even though I did really well. So I up and moved to New Zealand, and just getting a fresh start, I think, and meeting some of my best friends that I'll have for the rest of my life, would just prove to me that even when I do come back to Nebraska or the U.S. or wherever I am, it was just like, things are going to be okay. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was awesome. But yeah, travel is 100%, I think, for in any way, just growth.
Right. Even if it's in the same state,
Exactly.
Just getting out and, like, enjoying different things and seeing different things. I mean, you could drive to, I don't know. I mean, you could drive anywhere around the United States, not that far away, and have a decent time and get out and see different things. I mean, it just brings a whole new perspective to what you're going through in your mind, and seeing, different people in different scenarios. It's huge, I think.
I think that's a good point. I think that's a great point, is that it doesn't have to be like, 100 miles, or it doesn't have to be X amount of miles. It could just be getting out of your routine and just going from, just like you said, going to the next town, going to the next state, or just going to a different place, a different park than you usually do, and just seeing different things. So that's really cool.
Yeah, well, and I was actually I wanted to bring up another point that we had talked about a little bit earlier, and how like finding a passion and finding out what you're really good at. Well, so this kind of also draws along the lines of self-awareness. So that was one of the things that for me, and I think for me even now still to this day, that I always try and work on, because if you can become self-aware and understand what you're really good at, it can also help you find, what you're passionate about. And finding a passion about something can give you a drive and a meaning behind your life.
It can give you life,
right?
Yeah, for sure.
It allows you to grow, even because then you put your mind to something that you want to get better at day after day, and you want to continue to grow. And really, I think what a lot of life comes down to is just that fact, is that it's all about growth. Because if you're ever to a point in your life where it's like, this is it, I mean, you always have to keep going somewhere. So if you have no path forward, you're kind of stuck. And that's, I feel like, when you have doubts of like, where do I go next? That can be difficult, I think, for a person. So books and different things can help with that, I think.
Yeah. Definitely knowledge in any way, just finding out, exploring different things, whether that be, what you want to do with your life, or what you just kind of want to do on the side, whether that be a job or, even a hobby. I think that's, just finding things, different things that, like you said, passion gives you purpose. And whether that's, something simple, and I hate that, I've talked about this before, but just, there are some things that we give more credit to than others, or like different jobs, different occupations. And I don't think a person should ever feel bad for liking something or being passionate about something that they feel is, or that other people make them feel is like minuscule,
Right.
If this is going to be a super, maybe not a good example, but if you really wanted to be like a trash guy, be the best fucking trash guy you can, right?
Yeah,
exactly. So definitely our society has some, not rules, but just boundaries that we kind of cap things, and we're
right.
like, that's not really a passion, so.
Yeah, maybe we should talk about like college and money and a career, because that's kind of along those lines, because I do think that in life, I think money is important, just because there are certain things that, like, if you don't have certain necessities that money can provide, money you have to have money now to live somewhere, and to live and to do different things that are necessary for life. But there's been studies done, saying that above $50,000, a comfortable living, your happiness then basically is, it's not determined whatsoever about what type of income you make. There is a study though that I think they say like millionaires are typically happier. I guess millionaires are typically happier than somebody who makes like $50,000 a year, but there's absolutely zero difference between somebody who makes $1 million versus $1 billion, which is a shit ton more money. So once you have over a basic level of money that provides enjoyment and necessities, then money, it really has nothing to do with how happy you are.
Yeah, I agree 100%. They're just, once the basic needs for life are met, food, shelter, water, and once those are good to go, and it sucks that our society is kind of based around this chasing the paycheck, or you have to have money, but it's a sad fact of it, and you got to get the paper to live. So
Right. Yeah, and I think though that if you do have a passion outside of, something that like, some people have passions for business or, certain things, but some people's passions may not be business. And, there's no, as long as you have the above the necessities and you're still doing something that you're passionate about, then you're set. And for a lot of people, it's unfortunate because I think that a lot of students, so college for students right now there's a lot of people going to college to get degrees that aren't going to provide them in the money. They're not going to provide the return that they should get out of college. So they're paying, let's just say, $40,000 to go to college, and then they're going to get jobs that don't make nearly that much money. And they're taking out loans for it and doing all these different things. But it's unfortunate because it's a perception of when you're going through high school, teachers and if you're not going to college, it's seen as like, oh, that guy's dumb, or like he doesn't know what he's doing.
Right.
And it's for me right now, even how I look at my career, like college wasn't necessary for what I'm doing right now. If you want to be a real estate agent or be in real estate in general, to buy real estate, you don't need a degree whatsoever. To be an agent, you have to get a license, but that doesn't require you to go to college. So, and to own a business, Mark Zuckerberg, went to college and dropped out.
Right.
The majority of people that are in business and are very successful did go to college, but that doesn't mean that it's necessary. And that's just one example of business. But like, if you want to be something that has to do with art, like there's no reason to go to college just because your mom thinks that's the right thing for you to do, or you're going to look dumb if you don't go.
And it's kind of runs along the same line as just stigmatizing different things. So, you don't want to see a therapist because, that's maybe seen a little bit differently, and you don't want to not go to college because people might look at you differently. So my advice to everyone, I don't know everything. So don't always listen to me, but I do know that you don't have to do certain things that society tells you have to do to be happy or to be successful, and that is. But I do have a question. So you said you don't have to have, the degree or anything to do what you're doing. And first off, talk a little bit about Rebel, or just tell the listeners what Rebel is.
Yeah, so over the since I graduated last May, I started a business called Rebel Investment Group. Basically, my idea with it was, I was just going to be a real estate investor. So I bought a rental property. It was a conversion duplex, so I lived in the basement, and it had a kitchen and a bathroom and a bedroom, and then a separate exit and entrance. And then the other portion of the building was the first floor and then the second floor. And I rented that out to a family that lived up there, and then I lived in the bottom. So it was nice financially for my living situation. And then over the course, since November, I bought a house in November, did a flip on it, brought a construction crew in that I've worked with, and they did the flip on the project, and it was successful. And we then went and bought a duplex that we converted into townhomes. So we put a firewall down the middle, split them into two individual townhomes, and sold them off individually.
Yeah, I think that's super cool. Just, and like props to you for going out and doing something and just doing it on your own and taking that leap. And, that's scary to a lot of people, definitely. But so my question, you're going back to school, right? So why go back to school if you're and I know there's probably a reason, so.
Right, well, yeah, and so here's the thing, too. That's the interesting thing about it, because it depends on everybody's situation, and it depends on what you want to do. Because if you're going to go to college, if you don't know what you're going to do at all, then it makes zero sense to go to college. Because, to spend $20,000 to figure that out is fucking stupid.
Yeah,
definitely. Go get a job for a while and wait, and then once you know what you want to do, if it's a good idea for you to college then maybe rethink about it. But don't just go to figure out what you want to do, because then you're spending a bunch of money for no reason.
Exactly.
And that's what a lot of people do. And then there's also a lot of things that once you're in I guess I won't bring any of that up. But basically for me, why I'm going to go back to school. So I was, ran my own business for the last year, and it's been good. I mean, I've done well, but there's so many demons that comes along with that as well. Just the fact of like running your own business and having to work for your, like, if I don't do work, you know how many days I would just like sit there and be like, God, I'm a piece of shit. Like, I should be doing something, but I didn't. Like, it's difficult not to have the structure, not to have somebody telling you what to do. And I had no employees, so it was just me. So it wasn't even that I had the responsibility of like being a boss where if like my employees expected me to show up, it was just me. Like, nobody cared if I played Fortnite all day, or nobody knew. It was like I could sit there and nobody would know. But so that was kind of tough for me. And so, and then I also realized that during that time, I think that a lot of the podcasts that I would listen to for business stuff, they talked about the idea of carrying the water. And that's kind of just what they meant. You need to have a time in your life, if you're going to run a business or do anything like that, where you are learning that business under somebody else specifically. So, because you learn so much more from what other people are doing. Like, if I would have, if I knew exactly what I wanted to do and went and worked under somebody who was already doing it for 5 years and, barely made it through life with money, but then after that 5 years, like, you go out and perform, like, you'd be way better at it than if you just started doing it 5 years from then. And then, 5 years, the amount of time spent under them would benefit you a hell of a lot more than you trying to do it on your own.
Right.
And when I graduated, I didn't really think that was the case. I was just like, I'm going to do it. Like, I don't want to work for anybody. That's because that was just kind of my personality. I didn't want to have to work for anybody. And then so the year was tough, like, not really financially. I mean, it's fine. Like, I didn't make a ton of money though. Like, I guarantee you, if you're watching this and you have a full-time job, like, you probably made more money than me. But it was just, it wasn't that rewarding for me, I guess. So I decided to go back to school because I think it just makes sense. And I think I'm going to get the ROI out of it. Like, me going back to school and getting my degree in commercial real estate development or my master's in commercial real estate development will help me out in the future. Because if I'm 23 years old and I'm going to a bank and I say, hey, I want to build this project, I need $1 million. They're going to be like, fuck off. Because you've flipped a couple houses,
right.
So the timeline for me to start doing bigger projects, which I want to do, is going to be, it's going to be accelerated quite a bit by me going and getting the degree. Plus, I'm also going to learn a lot of things that I need help with. Like, I'm not that great when it comes to financial modeling of different projects. And, there's definitely some molding that still needs to be done for me, in terms of like me feeling confident to go out and do a bigger project. Doing a house flip is way different than doing a large, mixed use project or something along those lines. So I think that there's just a lot of, unless I want to go spend, and it's hard right now to find, like, it's hard. It would be tough for me to go to find a developer here in town and say, hey, I just want to work under you, and then I'm going to go start my own business.
Right.
Like,
they'd be kind of like, well, what do I get out of it?
Why? Why would I want you to work for me then if you're just going to leave and then compete? So I just think it makes sense for me to do that. But then also while I'm doing that, I just hung my license at a commercial brokerage here in town.
Okay.
And we'll be doing commercial sales and leasing for Prism. And so as I go through that program, the program's 21 months, the master's program, I'll be going and I have my commercial real estate license now, and I'll be selling and leasing commercial property. And I think that will help me round out my skills a lot too. And then with Rubble in general, because kind of how I had the whole thing envisioned from the start is that I wanted to do development and I wanted to do brokerage, which brokerage is like if you get a realtor and a real estate agent or something, that's, what a brokerage is.
Right.
And then development is somebody who goes and has an idea to develop an office building. So then they develop it and then they lease it out to people who want an office out of there. And then there's also the construction aspect. So it's kind of the three tiers that I want to have is development, brokerage, and construction, because they all go hand in hand. If you're doing one of them, you're dealing with all three.
Mm-hmm. So you want to do it all.
So I would like to do all of them in the business. So for me over the next 5 years, initially I was kind of naive, I guess, going out of college. I was like, I'm just going to go do this. Like,
Right.
I'm going to start a business and people are going to want to join me. But what happened is that's not the case. Like, I have to go out and I have to get experience. I have to have some credentials behind what I'm doing and, the stuff that I'm saying. I have to bring something to the table.
Right. And I think that's good that you understand that, like you're going to get that degree, but you're also chasing the education that comes with it. So you're not just, and this probably wouldn't go a lot or along with, most kids who go after masters, but just more their undergraduate degree. Just don't go for the degree,
Mm-hmm.
Go if it's gonna, if the degree is gonna get you where you want to go, definitely, but understand that the education that comes with it is, super beneficial. So I think that's awesome that you're going for, multiple different reasons.
Right. Yeah, there's got to be, if you're going to do, like, I don't always think that college is dumb, because there is, if you look at different people that have went through college, like, it does great things for people. You learn a lot as long as it's specifically what you want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And especially you find in master's programs that they're always very specific, or typically they are, which is a much, master's programs are always way better for developing skills than
Right.
just a general degree in anything. So that is nice. And that's why I decided to go back to school, because like I said, it's not necessary. Like, even an undergraduate degree isn't necessary to do real estate and do all the things that I'm talking about. But it's just one of those things that if I want to get on a fast track and do maybe, like, let's say by the time I'm 30, I'd like to have all of these different entities set up. And there's even more things that I'd like to bring into it. But, we could talk about that all day.
Yeah, it's just putting you farther ahead in the game.
Right. I hope so.
Right. So going back to, not going really back to anything, but just talking about, you don't need that degree, so why go if you don't know what you're going to do, because you're just wasting money. So in my case, I went for my freshman year, took all my generals, and then at that point I was like, why am I going to waste this money if I don't know what I want to do? So that's one of the reasons why I left, because I didn't want to, keep spending money when it wasn't going towards anything. And then finally, once I, kind of not grew up, but started to realize more things and learn more about myself, I understood that, psychology it's one of those degrees that are, kind of, it's broad and I could do a lot with it. I like the material, and furthering my education is something that I want to do. Even like getting a couple masters would be nice. So, and I can go, it doesn't just have to be in psychology. So I think that once I knew that, it was easy for me to go, get that degree, even though I didn't have a specific job lined up afterwards.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of professions that do need, like, just take a doctor, for instance. Like, you can't just go start cutting somebody up.
No, right.
If you want to be a doctor. And so obviously there are a lot of benefits to college, but it's unfortunate how it's been portrayed, because there's professions where it's required. There's professions where it's a good thing to do. And then there's some professions that it's just complete shit to get one. It makes no sense.
There's no reason, right?
And so, it's unfortunate also for students that are going out of high school that don't know what they do, it's just that they're pushed to go. You have to go. So they go take out a bunch of debt, and then they struggle for 20 years because they're paying off debt. And that's tough. I can't imagine. I honestly can't imagine it. And, but that's why I think self-awareness is so huge.
Yeah, definitely. So becoming self-aware and realizing what's that deep desire that keeps you going, that keeps you, wanting to do this, not necessarily just your business and just furthering your education and whatnot, but what's the desire behind it all?
Yeah, for me, I've always been involved in real estate. It's been in my family. My dad was a general contractor, built houses, and my uncle does real estate back home. And then my Uncle Jay here in town has Firespring, a business. And so it's kind of always been in my blood, and it's always something that I've been interested in. In high school, I knew that I wanted to do business.
Right.
Like, I would make up businesses all the time that were dumb. But, I would be like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And I thought it was so cool. And I'd show it to my dad, and he was like, yeah, okay. Give it back to me. But it's always been a passion for me. But self-awareness for me, I've always thought entrepreneurship was good because I've never been an authority guy. I don't really like to work for somebody.
Yeah, that's why I minored in it. I couldn't, and I might end up someday with a boss, but that was the driving factor for me, as I don't want to have people tell me what to do.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of been my thing, and that's really what drove me. But then I started to get into things like, have you ever done the Myers-Briggs?
Yeah, the personality test.
Yeah, so those were big for me because, and you also hear a lot of people. It's very important, I think, to understand what your strengths are, especially, and also what your weaknesses are. But I would say in business, especially in life, especially, it's important to know what you're good at and just be good at those things, and then surround yourself with other people who are good at the things you are bad at. You probably have heard that before, where you don't want. A lot of people are like, oh, I want to round out my skills. I need to work on these things that I'm bad at. I mean, you do, I guess, to a point, but like, don't stress over it.
Right.
If you're good at certain things, get really fucking good at them, and then find somebody who's good at the things you're terrible at. And that's kind of the whole thing around business. And what I found when I started Rubble was that I was good at these certain things, but I was the only one there, and I didn't really have a good business model or structured thing that I could say I could go out. Like, I couldn't pay somebody to bring on that was good at certain things that I was bad at.
Right.
And so it was difficult, and that's when I realized, okay, I need to go back to school. Like, I need to go work for a brokerage for a while and understand that whole thing if I'm going to do that, because I needed to, I had to carry the water for a little bit. I needed to go learn. I needed to go work for some, I really realized, like, okay, it's like, all right, I should probably go work for somebody for a little while and learn some stuff.
Definitely. So just like, I think it's a good, or what I strive to do is I never want to be the smartest person in the room, I never want to be at the top of the food chain, because then, there's no place to grow. If I'm going to be in the gym, I want to, lift with dudes who are lifting way more with me. If I'm training, I want to train with dudes who are just killers. If I'm learning, I want to be learning from people who know so much more than me that I'm an idiot. So, even just being, moving into this new place with Jacob and my cousin Chris, I think they're two very intelligent dudes. And I think, like I said, we all come, we're all doing different things. So we're all getting good at that. But then, we play our strengths and weaknesses, and we kind of just bounce ideas off each other. So I think that's really good. We'll take a little break there, and then, we'll come back and do it some more.
Let's do it.
This episode of the Coffee with Demons podcast is sponsored by Guethlein Psychological Services. John S. Guethlein is a licensed independent mental health therapist with a master's in counseling psychology and a doctorate in clinical psychology. Dr. Guethlein has been providing mental health services in the community of North Platte for 25 years. He has an extensive experience working with adults and adolescents coping with ADHD, anger management, and behavioral issues. John also provides therapy for a wide range of issues that can be addressed in the individual or family session. So thank you, Dad. Thank you for always supporting me and being the first sponsor of the Coffee with Demons podcast. Yeah, so I'll let you kick off what we were just talking about, and then we'll just have a discussion about it.
Yeah, so I brought up a book called Principles by Ray Dalio. Get yourself a copy. It's not sponsored, but so anyway, this was one of the. I feel like as I started reading books and stuff, and it's different for everybody that's into reading, I think. But like, there's sometimes when you just read books or you see certain things or listen to a podcast, and it's like, man, it just hits you, right at home. And this was a book for me that there was a few things in it that just really, I just grasped, and it changed the way that I thought about the world. And so kind of what we were talking about, one of the topics in the book is he kind of talks about the significance of one's life. And if you think about over the course of, the billions of years that the earth has been around, how, I wouldn't be blunt, like your life, honestly, like my life, your life, it's fairly insignificant compared to what the entire universe has already been through and what it will go through after you're not around anymore. And even some of the most known minds in the world and some of the people who you may think have made the most impact, like it really, the things that they've done, if they didn't happen, like it still wouldn't really matter.
Right. And that to me is, just one of the almost like a driving factor for like anxiety in people's lives is they think they think that these decisions that they're gonna make are gonna, it's life or death. And what I said to Nick is a lot of the times I try and ask myself like whether this is gonna be for a test score getting back, a new job or whatnot. If you can ask yourself the question from this decision, whether it happens or doesn't happen, whatever that may be, am I going to die? And most of the time, almost all the time, the answer is going to be no. Mm-hmm. So, life goes on after that. Mm-hmm. Life is going to go on.
Yeah. And it's always crazy too when problems arise where you might mess something up, or you think like, oh man, like this is going to screw me over or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like if you don't get the interview or you don't get the job that you really were wanting. It's very easy to think like, well, this is it. Like now I don't know what the hell I'm going to do and I'm stuck. But there's always a way that like if you sit down and you really think about it and you start thinking about your options, like there's always a way around stuff. And I mean, you just got to like sit down and think about it and think about other options and keep your mind open. Mm-hmm. And that's also another thing that he brings up a ton is to be radically open-minded. Because like one of the fascinating things that he talks about is that he brings up the issue or the topic all the time, like, oh, I definitely don't know everything, like for sure. So his thoughts on not knowing certain things is that he would always go out and he would get, if there was a subject, let's just say health care or health.
Okay.
So he would go out and he'd say, I'm going to get 2 of the smartest people on these subjects who disagree on something, and then he'd bring them together and sit down with them and basically just like let them go at it, and then he'd hop in the conversation too. And like he found it extraordinary a way for him to learn about these different topics.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's something that I even like to like do on here is just have, you can always find your truth. And what I mean by that is like I can always go out into the world and find somebody to back up or reassure what I think, and I can even in like academia I could find research for or against the point that I'm trying to make, just because there are so many viewpoints. So I think that's a great way to learn.
Yeah, because politics is a fascinating subject for me because I'm fairly down the middle. I don't really look into politics too much, but I just think that on certain topics, I try as hard as I can to be pretty much right down the middle. Like I don't like to just say, this is the way certain things are. At least I try my best to look at, things from each perspective. And I always find myself kind of sitting right on the edge of one way or the other. And I think things are also always circumstance.
Yeah, I don't think anything's black and white. So I think everything's situational. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I find that a lot in business too, where I think it's funny that if you think about through the course of the day, there are certain things that people think they need to be done this one way all the time. Mm-hmm. But it's like if you really stop and think about it, like why? And there's so many other ways that certain things can be done.
Definitely.
So I mean, it's just kind of a fascinating topic. That this book is one that if you haven't read it, dude, I highly recommend it. It's
I actually haven't, so I'm definitely gonna have to check it out. One thing that I know that you have seen because you told me to watch it, and so I watched it. Is we talked about a Tony Robbins video, and the video that I'll actually post it on the Coffee with Demons social media just so other people can see it, because I've never seen it, and I was surprised after watching it that I haven't, because it was so profound to me. Just Tony Robbins is a super motivational guy, and he speaks on it, and it's great. So if you want to kind of tell me your thoughts about it.
Yeah, so basically this is a video from Tony Robbins, and it's a TED Talk. But Tony Robbins is he's like a motivational guru, I guess you could say. And he brings up, basically he has what he says are the 6 human needs. And they're not needs as in like, food and all that stuff, but just kind of like, what is he? Psychological needs, I think is what he says. And so he has 6 of them. I'll just run through them real quick, and then we can talk about them. So he says certainty, variety, significance, connection or love, and then growth. Oh, and then contribution beyond ourselves. So I guess when you think about those things, like two of them right off the bat, they contradict each other, right? Which is kind of nuts that he put him, that he thought that he need. Well, I mean, I agree with him. You know, I agree with him pretty much to a T on these, because I do think that in many aspects of your life, you need certainty.
Definitely.
You know, I would say on certain things like, you know, you need food, you need to know that you have family there that care for you, or, you know, so there's certain aspects of your life that you definitely want to be certain at all times.
Definitely.
And then there's certain aspects of your life that you want variety in.
Yeah, and how he talked about that in the video was, you know, he talked about uncertainty as surprises. So he talked about most people like surprises. Yes, if they're good. If they're not, then we're like, we don't like surprises. But I definitely think that as a whole, it's just a way to grow. And each 6 of those things, I think, kind of has to do with growth. And even though connection's only kind of in one, I think all of them has to do with connection. He talks about you never feel the most alone. And then I thought about that in a little bit. I thought about it, and I was like, if these things would have happened, you know, things that have happened in my life, if it would have only been me knowing it, only been me feeling it, then the significance of it was it wouldn't have been high. And it was just simply something and it could have so I'll kind of slow down and try to portray this a little better. If something happened to me and it only benefited me and not even, you know, like my friend, and I just kept that to myself, probably not going to feel as much. But if I got to like tell them that and see their kind of reaction, that's going to just make everything expand. It's so much more.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so like certainty and variety, you know, it's funny that he has both of those because they do contradict. I mean, they're the complete opposite. But I think what he tries to portray is that, like, yes, there are things that you need to be certain, and some people need these 6. Like, some people need, you know, some more than others. You know, so some people may really need certainty in everything in their life. Like that's what they want, is they want certainty. So they want to know that they're going to go home and their husband's going to be there and they're going to go to work and do the same thing every single day. There's no variety to their life, and that's what they want because they know what to expect. Some people are completely opposite about that in their lives. Like they want to go travel the world every day. They want to wake up in a different hotel every day. They want to have a different job. You know, they want to do a different thing at their work every day. And it totally depends on the person. And so these 6 needs, if you should definitely look at the video, and then you kind of need to come up with your own thought process behind all of them, you know, which is important because it's not like in this video he's not like telling you this is the way you should think. He's just saying like these are the 6 things, and each person will kind of have their own perception about them.
Definitely. And the video is titled Why We Do What We Do, and he's kind of searching to find, because he's so I don't want to say you're not wrong when you're saying he's like a motivational guru, but he's not he says that he's not he's the why guy. He is the why guy. He wants to know why people do what they do, and it kind of goes right into those 6 things: is what makes people tick, what makes people happy, and continuing to be happy, or feeling like they have a full life.
Yeah, because when you start to lose out on like if you start to lose out on some of these things, like growth, I think is a big one for me, because I always think about it as if you were to stop pursuing something bigger than yourself or stop growing, then it's like you really have no path forward. And that to me would seem like, I mean, I would think that would be devastating, because if you're not constantly trying to improve or constantly trying to get better at something, then you're kind of just stagnant.
Yeah, definitely. And I think being content is even a little bit, you know, people might be content, but then I don't be content. Push yourself, go outside of your boundaries, and always, you know, look to better yourself or look to grow, whether that be knowledge or, you know, finding a passion.
Right.
So, and I think, I try not to get into religion, but I think that what I do like about religion is that it does give people, you know, this sense of purpose, or these ideals to work towards.
Right.
And that's that's why there are religions around the world. That's why people are religious, is because, it gives people purpose.
Yeah, and I enjoy this topic kind of because it also, if you think about all religions, it gives people certainty because it allows them to put a face to something that's going on in their lives. So, like, if I got hit by a car, I could easily say, like, oh, that was God's plan. He had that plan for me. And so it allows people the comfortability of saying, like, this is why this is happening in my life. And a lot of people like that. Mm-hmm. A lot of people like to be able to, and it also brings community. So it brings, connection and love, where if you're going to these different religious organizations or meetings, or, if you're going to church, like if you're a Christian, then the connection that you feel in those places is deep. A lot of people feel it because it's a sense of camaraderie again with a large group of people.
Right, and it goes back to, you feel more with other people. You don't see one person practicing a religion that only he's practicing. Because why? Why am I doing this thing that no one else has any interest in?
Right.
Why am I, you'd kind of look at him, or he'd not even look at himself, but he'd feel like this isn't worth it because people are going to get that sense of camaraderie, connection, and wanting to feel more with other people.
Yeah, and some people don't like the possibility that there's really nobody controlling us. Like, if for some people the thought of just saying, like, hey, we can all do whatever the hell we want right now. Like, we could all, we could go do whatever we want and there'd be no repercussions. The thought of that to some people, I think, is very scary, which is where I think religion plays a lot in all cultures.
Definitely. And I don't think, I wouldn't say that's a huge gripe about religion for me, but I do think that, people are the center of their own universe. Mm-hmm. You only have one life. Do what you want. And, there might be repercussions, but I don't think anything should stop you from doing something that you truly find that emotion of, happiness or enjoyment out of.
Yeah, I think that's a cool topic too. Is thinking about, like, if you think, anybody listening, if you think about, like, your life and you think that you're the center of it. Every day you wake up, you don't instantly start thinking about other people or what's going on, and the majority of the time throughout your day, you're thinking about yourself and what you're gonna do and why it's gonna benefit you. And the amazing thing is that there's 7 billion other people in this world that are doing the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. They wake up, and including however many different types of animals there are. Like, do you think a bird's thinking about what the fuck I'm doing when I wake up in the morning? No. The bird's thinking about themselves and what they're going to do, and they only think about it for 3 seconds because then they forget. It's just like, it's right. Incredible when you think about the different systems that are going on in the world and in the universe. Like, because there's also Earth, and that topic is fun to think about too if you start thinking about the universe and the Earth. And, like, it'd be so naive to me to think that there's only life on Earth.
Right.
Because if it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Have you seen the Netflix documentary with help me out here? Lazar, Bob Lazar.
Yeah, I have. I haven't watched all of it, but I think that's nuts. I don't know, like, I don't know if I necessarily, like, I don't not believe it. Right. Like, I think it's pretty cool. I hope that it's true.
And it's got to be like you were saying. It'd be very naive of us to think that we're the only that Earth that that
yeah, I think so. I think that'd be a dumb thought, honestly. Mm-hmm. Like, just knowing now that we know that how many different planets and stars and inhabitable zones, like, our distance to the Earth is in the habitable zone. Obviously, that's why we have life. There's, like, millions and billions of other planets that we have found now that we can see on telescopes that are in those habitable zones to their sun.
And it's crazy is this is kind of an abstract thought, but like you were saying, that bird's not thinking about that bird's not thinking about you. You're thinking about yourself, but the Earth as an organism itself is doing what it has to do to survive. Mm-hmm. So whether that be, changing its climate to get rid of whatever it has to get rid of and survive. So I think that's, there's so many ways you could look at everything.
Yeah, and it even comes down to the human body. You see, one of the ways that he portrays it in this book is that, like, the universe is a system on top of a system on top of a system. So it's like you have the entire universe. It's obviously, the Earth is revolving around the sun, and all the other planets are doing their things around their different suns and all of that stuff. And then you come to the Earth, and it's like the Earth has its own ecosystem where it's, everything's revolving around each other. Everything relies on each other. And then you go down to organisms like plants or the human body, and like everything in your body is doing the same sort of thing. And like then you go down to atoms, and they have the same type of like patterns as the universe.
Right.
So it's nuts to think about that, and to think about, like I said, just how insignificant some of the stuff that we think matters sometimes. When you think about how there's so many different other people on a different path right now doing different things that only care about themselves. Right. And everybody's the same way in that aspect.
So that's where I kind of battle with myself, is because I think, or I have this internal battle, because I definitely just want to implore people to do their own thing and be happy, because it's insignificant. And I hate to say that people's lives are insignificant, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. Do what you want to do. Be happy in the time you have here. And then another part of me, and I do agree with this part too, is just like to feel or to be alive and to have those emotions. I think you need to do things for other people. Mm-hmm. And Tony Robbins talked about that as well. It's just you got to feel with other people to truly feel. Mm-hmm. So, and then I started to think about when I'm the happiest and when I'm like in the darkest states I am, and it's usually alone when I'm alone. And then I think about, and this is kind of a dumb example, but I really like to, or I've always been the one to, spend money on my friends, whether that be, buying them a pop or something at the store. And then I think even if I don't get that back, I'm like, oh, they don't do it, or they're not, giving me back money or whatnot. Mm-hmm. So why am I doing it? But then I find myself doing it time and time again, because it gives me joy. So
it gives you, like, it's kind of like the significance thing in this. It's like significance can be interpreted in different things, but like Definitely. The significance in that moment would be like, you're being able to show up for them as a friend, mm-hmm. and they're like, man, like, thanks, I appreciate that, and they recognize you in that moment, and that's significance. Like, that's mm-hmm. that feeling. And
maybe that's that payback that in some of the times that I can't see, because I don't think that I'd do something for somebody, and if they were like, gave me, where they were rude about it, I don't think I'd do it again. And I might, who knows? But I think that, whether that be monetary or something as mm-hmm. simple as a smile and, thanks, man, I think that payback is giant as well and speaks volumes.
For sure. Yeah.
There are definitely a couple things that we're talking about. I want to talk about Tony talks about running from death. And what I kind of write here is he says, who would you call, what would you say, and, what would you do? And that goes back to the insignificance thing. Like, if you knew you were going to die, you'd change how you live your life, right? Mm-hmm. If I knew I was going to die at this, say in 2 days, what would I do in those 2 days? Mm-hmm. And I think people, that's a good, if you don't know what you want to do, ask yourself that question and then see what comes to mind. See what you truly want to do, what you like, and, who you're going to connect with.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thought, because it also kind of ties into that, like, everybody's on their own path, and there are certain things where, for me, a lot of times when I think to that thought of like everybody's on their own path, it kind of makes me happy, because you think about, like, it really doesn't matter what you do, but if I were ever posed with the questions like, hey, what would you do if I was going to die tomorrow? Like, I mean, honestly, I really don't know, but I would try and, I mean, every single moment from then on I would try to make a lot more significant than I do currently. Right. Every person that I talk to, I would want them to know and be able to, like, know who I am, or know who they are, and have a connection with them in some way. Mm-hmm. Because if you think about it, like, your relationships to yourself or to you are so important. Your relationships with other people are so important mm-hmm. for you. And I think that, if I were going to die, like, I would want anybody that I've ever encountered in my life to know that, like, if I ever, hurt them or in any way, like, I'm sorry. And if I ever made them happy in some way, like, thank God that I was able to do that. But I would just want everybody to know, I guess, that I cared about meeting them, and I feel like in those times of death, you see that people just tend to, everything comes back to their relationships. They didn't care like, oh, I made $1 million. They don't care about any of that shit. They care about like that their family's there and they love them, and that their friends are there and they care about them, and they want their friends to know that they've always cared about them. Definitely. It always is back to the relationships.
100%. And I think that's right along the lines as you feel more with other people. Mm-hmm. He also talks about, in the video, he talks about resources for resourcefulness, and I think we should talk about this a little bit just because, it might help people understand that just because they don't have a lot or have something that doesn't, it's not stopping them. So he talks about resources, and what I mean by resources is resources as money, time, contacts, experience, technology, more tangible things kind of like that you can rely on versus resourcefulness, which would be creativity, determination, passion, love, emotions. And so I teach, my part-time job is a job called Happy Feet. I go around to different daycares and I teach kids soccer. I teach little kids soccer 2 to 6. So I'm not really doing a whole lot of teaching, but it's more about that relationship and making them feel good and just, having a good time. So I think, and I wanted to talk about this just because I think we lose a little bit of this as we grow up. But for me, when a kid's sad or he's, they're crying, they're not doing whatever, I don't go and I don't try to, there's nothing that I can hand them that's like, get better. But it's something simple as going up, looking them in the eyes and like smiling, and they see that emotion, and what they feel from that is, they're like, oh, things are okay. And I think that just builds, it'll build them up. It gives me enjoyment, and then using that as like a driving force forward, because as we grow older, I think that that's weakness is looked down upon, and so maybe somebody doesn't want to help, like put their hand out and help. I think that showing you care is almost, it kind of went out of style, and hopefully it comes back into style. But yeah, so any 2 cents on that?
I mean, I feel like also, like relationships, I feel that as you mature, you kind of start to like get better at that. You kind of start to understand like, wow, these relationships that I've built are more significant than I think. Like I shouldn't just go, I shouldn't hold grudges. I shouldn't do these certain things, because as you mature, you just understand that like something, like a lot of that stuff just doesn't really matter. Like you could get past that. If you've had a relationship with somebody at some point previously, like there shouldn't be some roadblock because of something that they said that you're like, oh, I hate that person now. Because like what they said was probably so insignificant and doesn't matter that like just move past it.
Right.
And so for a kid to get like knocked down and beat up about something, like you hate to see that, because 10 years down the road, they won't even probably remember that interaction. But in the moment, like they're so sad and they're so upset. And you can probably think about in your life where you might hear something tomorrow that somebody says something that pisses you off, and you get so mad and you get so upset in that moment. 10 years down the road, you're not even going to remember what was said,
right,
unless it was maybe somebody that was like super, a big part of your life, and it was like something super bad that they said. But a lot of the things that people hold grudges for, a lot of times just aren't something to, not something to change your life over. It's like you can always get past those little things.
Definitely. And I think, like you said it best, you can always get past those little things. Having emotional intelligence is, I don't think we don't put enough, I don't know what I'm trying to say. We don't give it enough attention. There's intelligence, book smart, but be able to feel what others are feeling and be able to notice how they're feeling and how that affects you, how that affects the people around them. And just being able to, just being aware, self-aware and aware of everybody around you.
Yeah, self-awareness is a big thing. Another thing that came to my mind when you were talking about the resources and versus resourcefulness too, was that I think in your life, a lot of the times it's easy to say like, oh, that person has it better off because they have, these advantages or resources. As you could say, like if I had a bunch of money that I wanted to go out and do stuff with, to grow a business, for instance, those may be resources that I have that do put me at an advantage, but from somebody's standpoint that doesn't have the resources, then you have to have resourcefulness. So you have to be able to go out and create certain things and you have to be able to create value. Like if what you're doing or what you're trying to do doesn't create value for other people, then you have no leverage with anything. No, whether like if I'm trying to run a business and I don't have knowledge of the business, then you kind of have to have three things. You have to either have, you have to have at least one, hopefully two. You have to have either the knowledge to do something, the skill to do something, or like the capital or resources to do something. Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, so I was going to say, you just have to have at least two of those three things, and those allow you to be resourceful and go out and get the resources that you may not have, or
Right. Because not having resources, it might be easier with, but not having them doesn't stop you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't have the money. There's other ways. There's ways to make money because I don't have the technology. There's ways to go around that. So. But we're kind of getting close to time here. Is there anything, final thoughts that you want to leave with the listeners? Anything that you want to say?
The thing that's been in my head since you asked me to be on here and since I started listening was just that how impactful I really think that this podcast could be because of the simple fact that every single person, it doesn't matter who you are, at some point in your life you go through difficult times. And even every single day you wake up, you have highs and lows. And the ability to recognize that and actually think about that and process it, like gives you a perspective that I think a lot of people don't have. Because it's very easy for me to look at somebody who seemingly has a good life, but they may be going through things that I don't even know about. Right. So I guess you shouldn't label somebody based on their situation, or what they portray to different people. Like they're still probably going through a whole lot, and that's why I think this podcast is so impactful, is because there's so many people that are.
Well, I appreciate those kind of words, and that's why I'm doing it, is because I hope people that that I'd give them a different perspective and they can take away what they want to take away and just grow as a person. I do want to thank you for coming on. I think that was great. I think that people will be able to get a lot of stuff from what we talked about, and it doesn't have to be at face value. It can be, kind of think about it and taken away from it. But yeah, that was great. So I appreciate it, and thank you.
So absolutely, man.
And that's a wrap for episode number 4. I want to thank my guest, Nick Wilkinson, for coming on the show. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope he did as well. I hope our listeners are able to get something from it. I was able to get a lot from it, as I hope Nick did as well. As far as Coffee with Demons goes, check us out at www.coffeewithdemons.com. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and we will be posting more content about our upcoming meetings that we'll get rolling here soon, new blog posts, and as well as a new podcast. So, like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did, and you'll be hearing from us. Peace.